Good morning. Thank you for having me here. So as Christy mentioned, the B2C space can learn a whole lot from the B2B space. Likewise, we think about the consumer when we think about the B2B buyer. Our B2B buyers are also consumers in their everyday lives. If we think about that Netflix effect, it's the expectation for responsiveness and relevance wherever we are in our buyer's journey or into that customer life cycle. And this is all amplified by the complexity of B2B buying group dynamics in this self-directed journey for the B2C buyer. So where does that leave us today as marketers? Today, we'll take a look at what that means when the buyer is actually in the driver's seat. How are marketers rethinking their program design and activation strategies, and even things like content gating strategies? How can we make it easy for the buyer to self-serve that information that they need wherever they are in their journey? The most innovative companies are customer obsessed. Everything that they do is designed to ensure that that customer has the best possible experience. And another key trend that we're seeing today is how the technology stack is actually evolving to meet these challenges, very much fueled by artificial intelligence. So let's jump in. The first thing to consider is, what are we selling? Who are we selling to? And how do they buy? The buying journey is very different for each of these three products. It affects the length of the decision process, who needs to be involved in making that decision, and how many people are going to have a seat at the table. So the first place to start is to really think about how our customers buy. And here we have just a portion of the Serious Decisions buyer's journey map. What we'll take a look at today is that interplay between content and interaction. It's not just enough to determine, is this persona more apt to engage in digital messaging or in-person, human-based messaging? We need to consider not only the interaction points, but the content that is most going to resonate with that persona. If that wasn't enough, we have more than one persona in that buying journey. So we need to consider the needs and the dynamics of each of these personas as they navigate this buying process together. So where does that leave us? The first place to take a look is what is actually resonating with our buyers. And so this is a snippet of data from our B2B buying study, really focused on the manufacturing buyer. And as we can see in these three green bars here, online interactions are impactful at all three stages of the journey. And it's worth noting this is not an activity metric. This is an impact metric. We're going to assume that everybody's online at some point in time. These buyers have cited these online interactions as having the most impact and influence in their decision making. So if we were to call out some stats that are really illuminating for the manufacturing buyer, we find that they spend an average of 25% of the journey in all three of those macro stages searching online. Exploration of the provider website, however, is cited as being one of the most impactful interactions. And it's also interesting to note that the impact of using the vendor's mobile app actually increases in the later stages of the journey. So where does that leave us as we think about all of these different touch points in the mix? And certainly thinking about the website and the role that it plays in connecting all of those interactions, not just digital, but human as well. This is where buyers are going to self-serve information and actually make the sale. So if we think about innovation within our marketing mix, it really needs to start here with the website. So this idea of innovation is different for every company. It's really starting with where you're at today and where you want to go in the future. For some organizations, up-leveling their personalization strategy may be innovative enough for now. For others, incorporating some of those more experiential experiences into their interactions and their mix is where they're really going to find the most opportunity in innovation to engage and activate that customer base. So as we talk to B2B marketers in the space, we're really looking at 5 key opportunities that these forward-looking marketers are capitalizing on in order to meet their buyer where they are within their journey and to be there for that buyer with their future needs. So those key buckets are buyer enablement, connecting that tactic mix, optimizing media, whether that's paid, earned, or owned, leveraging artificial intelligence across multiple use cases, and really embracing a culture of experimentation, data-driven learning, and risk-taking. Today, we're going to focus on buyer enablement, the interconnected tactic mix, and artificial intelligence as 3 key pillars of that connected buyer experience. And the first is buyer enablement. This one's big, and this really refers to the shift from selling to buyers to enabling buyers to get the information that they need throughout their journey. And this is where we really see marketers rethinking their tactic mix and all of those gates that we put in the way of our buyers as they're trying to consume our information. Under buyer enablement, we're rethinking our search strategies. So one trend is the utilization of voice. So first think about how are your buyers, or those personas that we're looking at activating, how are they currently using voice? Is this an opportunity for your organization for innovation? In other words, are your buyers there? Are they interacting with voice? 2 opportunities when we think about voice. First is voice enabled. So here's your search strategy. If somebody's using Alexa to browse and shop, are they going to be able to find our products? The second is a voice first interaction. So if we think about a purpose-built voice interaction, so maybe that's an Alexa skill, maybe it's a Q&A. So opportunities in voice, time to start to rethink those search strategies and make sure that we're speaking in the language that our buyers are using. And the next is bots and virtual assistants. So we're certainly all familiar with those chatbots that are so very helpful when we land on a website. What's really driving this is the conversation. These conversations are based on and responsive to the buyer's needs and their questions. It's the ability to not only support those existing customers, but to engage a new visitor to the site and put them on the path to that best interaction or that best content based on their needs. And the other is augmented experiences. So if we think about buyer enablement, how can we help buyers absorb large amounts of complex information or even engage in an experience with the brand? So if we think about opportunities for augmented experiences, that could be everything from incorporating virtual reality into your kiosk or your trade show booth, or it could be something as simple as dropping a VR viewer into your direct mail piece, or even thinking about using some augmented reality filters to drive engagement in social media. The possibilities are endless, depending on the use case that you're tapping into augmented experiences for. So to summarize, as we think about buyer enablement, the key to enabling buyers is really understanding them, speaking their language, optimizing that web experience based on what they need, and rethinking those gating strategies to really meet buyers where they are. Yesterday, you saw a really good example from HD Supply doing a great job of enabling their buyers with search and merch. So the key, again, meeting the buyers where they are and be relevant based on what they're looking for in order to get to that next step in their journey. The next piece is the interconnected tactic mix. So if we think about opportunities for innovation, the idea of having multiple channels in your mix is not necessarily new. The ability to really deliver a consistent and engaging and personalized experience across all of those touch points, that's a little bit newer. So as we think about where does this land in terms of priority for marketing leaders, according to our CMO study, 29% cited this as the highest priority to implement within the next 2 years. So delivering an informed and connected buying experience. So what does that mean in terms of opportunity areas? And the first is thinking about buying group context. So as we saw earlier with the journey slide, a B2B buyer is likely not in this process alone. So who else is engaged in that buying decision and at what point in the journey? And our goal of understanding this context is to really maximize the impact and the relevance of those tactics that we're putting out there. It's also another very important input for personalization, thinking about not only the role within that buying group, when are they going to be active, what are the messaging components that are most likely going to appeal to them, and what is that decision gate that we need to make sure that persona can cross in context of everyone else that's involved in that process. Personalization and adaptation. So it's not a nice to have anymore. Personalization at scale is the new reality, and we need to be able to adapt to our buyers where they are based on what they've already purchased, the content that they've already interacted with, and all kinds of other variables that we think about as they progress throughout their journey. So buyers continue to show, even in the B2B space, preference for a self-directed journey. So if we were to treat them the same with the same creative, the same message, the same product information, that's going to fall flat. We need to understand who the buyer is and what resonates with them and make sure that we're personalizing that journey accordingly and we're really adapting to those buyer signals as we detect them. And you'll see an example of this kind of adaptation later today from Beacon Roofing. And finally, we have omnichannel engagement. So it's not enough to design that ideal interconnected tactic mix. We need to make sure that we're driving engagement within that mix as well. Those responses, that's how we understand how best to tailor that next interaction. So the key here is to really remove silos within the organization and look at that experience across channels, really driving for consistency and connection. An example here is a personalized website experience. This should be integrated into our nurture programs as well and adapted based on those buyer signals. Key takeaways here. Thinking about that ideal path for the buyer through their journey for each persona as well as the individual in context of others that are participating in this decision-making process. Look for opportunities to gain insight into not only individual buying behavior, but the buying behavior of the group. And then align your tech stack to ensure that you have the capabilities and connections to deliver an optimal buyer experience. And finally, how are we accomplishing all of this? Artificial intelligence is key to carrying the weight of this work. As we see in our CMO study, we have 59% of marketing leaders are really looking to tech to help solve their growth challenges or opportunities over the next 2 years. AI is in all of it. So what does AI help us do? It helps us take in more information, process more information better, faster, and stronger, make predictions, and make decisions that are going to drive pipeline and revenue. Our first use case is the most widely adopted when we think about AI, and that's prospect sourcing, intent, and prioritization. We're really taking a look at fit, intent, and engagement to determine how and where to best engage these buyers. And that brings us to engagement and orchestration. So how can we make sure that that interconnected tactic mix and that consistency of buyer experience across channels, how can we make sure that that is actually something that we can attain? And that's where AI comes in, assisting with this idea of engagement and orchestration, that idea of the next best action or the next best offer. But we still need to consider the most fundamental use case here, and that's personalization. If we don't have the right approach to personalization in place for our buyers, whatever we do when it comes to our channel strategy is going to fall a bit flat. So if we think about how do we operationalize this, content tagging for activation is key, hopefully tied together by a universal taxonomy. So we can understand not only our content, but also things like our product content and how is that resonating with certain personas that we're trying to engage. We also think about things like in-the-moment personalization. So adapting that experience based on what we know about the buyer at the time that that experience is activated. Triggered communications are a good example of this as well. So really leveraging artificial intelligence to produce the best possible outcome or interaction based on what is known about the buyer as well as the product. And lastly, we have content creation and insights. So thinking about the depth of information, the depth of understanding that we can attain from artificial intelligence as we think about our content inventory. So this is very important as we think about scaling the delivery of custom content. Is it tagged properly? Do we know who we're activating the content against in terms of buyer personas and those signals that we might want to respond to? So some key takeaways here as we think about leveraging AI throughout the buyer's journey. Humans are going to work alongside these machines. They're not going to be replaced. Artificial intelligence really helps marketers enhance engagement through personalization, tactic matching, content creation and insights, orchestration, and one-to-one conversations. So it's an opportunity to really think about your use cases for leveraging those AI capabilities that you likely already have in your tech stack and seeing what more can be done with those. The increasing adoption of AI capabilities will continue to introduce new opportunity for innovation for B2B demand marketers. Innovation isn't always about shiny objects. The most impactful innovations are really based on buyer need. A data-driven approach to innovation really provides a continuous feedback loop for attracting, engaging, and qualifying the right buyer for your business. So action items, as we think about these opportunities to innovate, to enable our buyers, to ensure that they're receiving a connected experience throughout their journey and into their customer lifecycle. Enabling buyers is really the key to supercharging the revenue engine. It requires an understanding of the individual, the persona, the buying group, as well as activation of multiple unique and complex buying journeys. Leveraging technology to help understand your buyer and deliver that connected experience is the only way to scale and is really the way into the future as we think about supporting that buyer with those B2C expectations, even though they might be in the B2B space. Thank you.